Welcome to the Livecast Conversations with. On this show, my guests and I explore the bumps and triumphs of their journey to extract the gems from their experiences, because success leaves clues, and today we turn those clues into billboards for you. I'm your host, Gene Bernier, founder of Peeled Back, speaker and co-active coach, guiding leaders to ruthlessly pursue a life worth living. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 13 of Conversations with. Today, we welcome Breanna Snow. She's a trained registered nurse and has worked in a variety of specialties over the years. She started her career in trauma surgery and quickly transitioned into the Cardiovascular Intensive Care Unit. After gaining experience, she then went on the road as a traveling nurse in both Connecticut and California. Although she's loved her career abroad, Breanna eventually relocated to Kelowna, British Columbia, with her husband and opened their very own health clinic, Valeo Health Clinic. She now specializes in medical aesthetics, vitamin IVs, and iron IVs. And when she's not at the clinic, you can find her on a run, hiking, or playing at the beach with her littles. Breanna, my words cannot do you justice. Thank you so much for being on the show today, and let's get into it. Let's talk about your journey. It seems like you definitely have quite the journey that you've been through over the last in your adult life so far.
Yeah, I bounced around a little bit, which has been fun. I lived in Calgary for kind of my junior years, and then went to Edmonton, and then bounced around a little bit and have had actually a number of exciting experiences.
Well, just with the amount of bouncing around, like I want to jump into this question's jumping up right away, is like there's a resilience-ness to that. Like, what does it mean to be like on your journey doing, especially in the healthcare world, and doing all these different things in all these different locations? Like some of those, like Cardiovascular Intensive Care Unit, does not sound like that's a walk in the park for most people. And then being able to go as a traveling nurse is like, how has resilience played into that for you?
So that's an excellent question. I would say probably some of my biggest life experiences have come out of traveling. And the first one I can think of is when I moved to Connecticut. So my husband was doing chiropractic school in California. And so my ultimate goal was to get to California. But before you can go there, you have to do what's called like a walkthrough state. So you have to go somewhere else in order to get a Social Security and a license. And so my first experience was in Connecticut. And so with that, I remember being like the dead of winter, and I literally knew no one. So he dropped me off at the airport. I got all set up, and then he left. And it was it was a moment where I had to make this decision of how was I going to show up in this space? Because I remember driving this shitty rental car with like terrible winter tires. And my first thought was, if I go off the road, I have no one to call. There is zero people that I know here. There's nothing to do. And that experience has given me a sense of strength that even when I know nobody else there, I can rely on myself and I can do it and I can figure it out. And yeah, so it was a huge gift, actually, a huge learning for me that experience gave me.
And while you were in that experience, is that a place you can now reflect going, oh, I have the strength to do that. But like, what was it like as you're like, oh my God, I'm in this place by myself with no connections? How did you build to eventually learn to have that strength in yourself?
I would say, well, it gave you a huge motivation to meet people, because I remember, I've never been so motivated ever. When day one of orientation, I remember just being, and I'm fairly friendly to start with, but just telling like the first few people I met, I was like, look, well, let's just exchange numbers. If you go off the road, I will come get you, or vice versa,
Right.
So I think that really helped to motivate me to be very personable, or to create those connections quickly, I think would be a better way to say it. And I think during it just made me very aware of where my capabilities were and where I needed to grow them.
There was kind of like two things there that we can maybe chase. Is like, one is like there's the power of connection, and like, and within connection there's relationships. So like part of that growth is at the speed of building those relationships.
Hmm.
What, how is that now? I guess I'll lead the question. I know that you're part of the JCs here in Kelowna and
Hmm.
stuff as well, but like, how has that evolved the way that you approach relations, like building relationships now, and the importance of that?
I think I think that relationships, there's two different threads there. I think we have surface level relationships and acquaintances, and then I think we build deeper relationships as we get to know people a little bit better through those experiences. I
Right.
would say a lot of our relationships start surface level, and specifically in those sort of settings they did. I got to know a vast number of people very quickly, but there was only very few that you sort of drill down to that you're like, okay, you're going to be my person. Like, we're going to figure this
Right.
out and we're going to kind of drive through it together. Um,
Right.
which then I think in that experience, you sort of have a choice if you have connected with people quickly. That Connecticut experience for me was either going to be a make or break. Either this was going to be totally terrible and I was going to like not really enjoy it and kind of, struggle through it, or which I chose the latter, being I made a really great girlfriend and I saw more of the East Coast in 3 months than I probably will in the majority of my lifetime.
Right.
So, right. And it was through that relationship and that connection of getting to know somebody that I had such a phenomenal experience.
So the word there, the choice is like you had a choice of like, oh, this sucks, or I'm gonna make the most of this.
Mm.
Was there like a conscious point where you're like, I'm going to make the most of this? Sorry, the you suck story. We're gonna go make this a great story.
Yeah, I think it often plays into that. I think, and I've looked at a number of my relationships and choices as I've gone through. My bigger moments, one being when my husband moved down to California, that was a huge choice in our relationship. Is either this is going to be terrible and I like this is just actually not something we're going to do, or I'm going to suck it up and we're going to just figure it out and this will be great, was kind of one of those choices. Connecticut was another one of those where it was either this is going to be terrible or we're going to drill in and it's going to be great.
Mm. And it's I think that's a powerful understanding to have within what were all the adventures that you've had so far, and the woes to come is like you get to make that choice.
Hmm.
And I fear when you speak to it, there's not a helplessness to it. There's an adventure. There's something to go find and build when you make the choice to go. Let's make the best of this. Let's find out how this does add to our story, not take away from it.
Well, and an advantage.
Yeah.
Like there's definitely an advantage in being the one to drive your train, I guess, for lack of a better word, but to drive which way you want to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does that, now knowing that and looking back on it, like how did that choice impact the types of destinations you wanted to set for your train, for like where did you want to go for yourself and with your husband and everything else that the two of you have built since then?
Oh, um, how did the say that one more time? Run that past me again one more
All
time,
right,
Gene.
so like what I hear within it, you have these moments, you make the choice to go, well, this could suck or this could be something cool. We were going to choose to build something awesome here.
Mhm.
Now knowing that you have the power of making that choice, does it impact or change the way that you create like goals and outcomes together?
I'd say so. Yes and no. I would say more for me. That choice comes in. It does come proactively, but it also comes at the point of when you're facing maybe a challenge. That's
Mm,
I think where I become more notable of that choice is a challenge pops up and it's which way do I want to go.
right.
It we will gracefully lay out our path, but challenges will always pop up. And I think that's where it comes into play
Oh,
more
that's
so.
awesome. Right. It's like it's not so much it's not about setting where the destination is. The destination sounds like there's a component of like setting that and being like committed to that for yourself and with your husband and where that's going to go, and then accepting and knowing that at some point we're going to run into something that we could never plan for, and we're going to have to trust within ourselves to make the choice that serves us best.
Yeah, I would say that's probably an accurate reflection. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were in Connecticut, got there, went, oh my God, what if I went in the ditch? I don't know anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Made a girlfriend that
Mm-hmm.
you were able to go see the East Coast, and eventually, what did you call it? A walk through to California?
Oh, a walkthrough state. So
Yeah.
in nursing, certain desirable states, they'll make it so you can't go directly there. So you have to go visit essentially your work in another state to get your social security number.
Right.
So Connecticut, I basically told my recruiter, send me anywhere because I just wanted to get this done like as quick as I could. And that was one of the first ones that popped up. And yeah, there's that was a number of learnings happened there.
Care to share
A
any of those?
number. uh, well, so good tip for life, ask a few more questions, probably. So I went to California, or I went to Connecticut, and it's very different than the Canadian healthcare system in that um, every hospital is very different. And in Connecticut, the one that I went to, I didn't really realize until after I looked it up that it was like the seventh most dangerous city in the US.
Oh wow.
So that was a little bit enlightening when I got there. The other piece of that too is exactly what that work-life balance looked like there and the workload. So there was a lot of learnings that had to happen very quickly. They use different measurements for their lab work. They have different drug names, even different acronyms for things. So it wasn't that I didn't know how to do all of that job, but just learning the different lingo or the language in that setting was a little bit of a learning curve, as well as the workload. It essentially doubled going from where I was working to where I went to.
Right.
So a few more questions I think are warranted.
So there's an opportunity when you're making those big choices is to say, hey,
Yeah.
what's actually involved in this? What's an understanding that gap of where you were in the Canadian system to where it would be in that Connecticut hospital, and understanding
Mm-hmm.
that. Do you think looking back, you would have been able to ask enough questions to get a sense of that gap beforehand without having to go in and actually experience it?
Yeah, yes and no. I think a lot of learnings happen once you jump into a scenario. So there's some setup that could have happened there, absolutely. I think also some of it's just an on the job thing. And that's in
Right.
life too. There's certain scenarios where, the big question of like, oh, are you going to have kids and what's it like to have kids? I think people can tell you a number of things, but until you maybe walk that path, it's just different.
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting you use the word jump in, because that's like uh, you had to make a commitment. There wasn't, you couldn't keep one foot on the side and kind of hedge into it. That was like an all or nothing choice.
Hmm. Yeah, you sign your contract and you go. I mean, if there's extenuating situations or things that pop up, you can make some choices. You could try to break your contract, but essentially, once you've said yes, you're going.
You're going, and you're
Yeah,
there for that 3 month term, and then
yeah,
on to the next place.
yeah.
Once you got to California, what were you able to take with you from those learnings and being able to ask the questions and understanding like there's a difference between where you did your schooling, where you got your initial experience in nursing, coming down to the American system, like, and now going, oh, there's actually power in building at least a good one deep friendship here to have each other's back, taking
Hmm.
that into California. What was that transition for you? What did you learn as you made that next leap into that new environment?
Well, so what I learned about myself is that I personally prefer a deep connection rather than a bunch of sort of surface level connections. I would rather have one really good friend than, say, 20 so kind of
Yeah.
friends. So I think that was a learning for me. So I really chose wisely where I wanted to invest my energy with people. Also, knowing that we weren't going to stay down in California long term, we knew it was going to be likely just a 2-year window, and then we'd be popping out. So I think that also played a role into who I wanted to invest my time with. And in terms of my career, I would say I just really tried to take advantage of every opportunity that came forward. So there was different learnings I could do there, and it was a vastly different experience. I went from Connecticut, where I'd work a 12-hour shift, and I would maybe go to the bathroom once in 12 hours, and you'd eat with one hand and chart with the other so that you could just be back and forth into every room. To in California, the hospital I worked at was very different because you would be hard pressed not to get a break. Somebody would be coming in, sending you out every so often. But also the clientele was very different. I worked in a very high-end private hospital, and they were very driven on customer service as opposed, and it's sort of in a tiered system, sort of. So kind of the more money that you had, the higher the expectation was, which was kind of interesting to me. So yeah, anyways, it was a few learnings there.
What does that now, like from all those learnings and coming back into what you guys have created with your own health clinic? Like, what is, you know, walk us a little bit through that adventure of getting things started, deciding to relocate. You have little ones now, building a business, and you going in on that business.
So we decided to leave California at the end of my husband's doctorate and moved here. And for that, we just knew we didn't have children at the time, but we have family in Canada. We just wanted to be a little closer home prior to setting anything up. And with getting a clinic started, you're not usually going to bounce around from place to place. So wherever you set up is where you want to be. So we looked at that when we were getting going. And initially, the idea was that we would buy into an existing health clinic with friends who had gotten it going about 6 months prior. And as time went on, they decided they actually didn't really like business. That just wasn't their goal, their forte. And an opportunity presented itself where it went from possibly having one partner or two partners, so three of us total, to then, do you guys want this 100% and run with it?
Oh,
Which,
wow.
yeah, it was, there was a lot of shifting there, and kind of same thing. There was challenge or choice presented, and we had to look at, okay, well, what's our goal? Where do we want to go? What is this going to look like? And how do we want to make that happen? So a lot of pieces in there to dissect. But my husband worked in the clinic for about 2 to 3 years, and then we bought it. And what we bought was actually a company that had 3 practitioners and 1 front office staff. To now, here we stand in 2023. So to give you a bit of a timeline, so that would be about, what would that be, about 6 to 7 years later. Now we have a staff of 30.
Wow.
So very, very different as to how we grew it and how that came into play.
Oh, 100%. So can we talk about how you grew that and, all the things that went along with that? After 6 or 7 years, you experienced and went through the COVID pandemic here in Canada, which had a significant shutdown for the healthcare industry, especially for chiropractic and physiotherapists and RMTs, which probably put a pretty big kink in that plan, in that kind of, I would, in that midpoint of that journey.
So what that looked like actually is I was working at the hospital. So when we moved from California here, I stayed in the hospital for about 8 years. I worked in the recovery room, and I really enjoy that system. I really enjoy the critical thinking and the people, but just sometimes the execution of how things are done could be done differently. And so with our own healthcare clinic, we really wanted to keep that same structure, that it's the patient or the person first. I think that was another piece that I didn't love about California, was just that it was very much a tiered system. The more money you had, kind of the better, quote unquote, treatment you would get. And so for us, it's just that everybody should get good care. I don't really care how much money somebody has. You should, when you walk in, you're going to get the same kind of treatment, regardless whether you're in for a free consult or whether you're coming to do a more exclusive service. So I think that's a big part of just care in our clinic and keeping people first. And so we were very fortunate when I moved. This has been sorry, I'm kind of going on a couple
It's all
tangents
right.
here. But the ethos with our company all the way through, I think why we've been very fortunate to attract so many people is they all have that same thought, is we want to treat the person first. We want to get you better. We're here for you when you need us. And then, when you don't need us, come back when you need that maybe month, whether it's like monthly care or something happens, or, but we're here to support you along that whole process. So I think that's been one of our really key and core values, is people have felt that. They felt that they're being cared for, and our practitioners really push that forward. The other part, going from the hospital into the clinic, which has been an interesting kind of shift for me, and being surrounded, I'll say, in maybe more of our traditional Western medicine and the hospital, and now looking at our collection of practitioners that are chiropractors, naturopathic doctors, physiotherapists, and the works, is a lot of it is more preventative healthcare and looking at a problem differently. Because if I break my leg, please take me to the hospital. Like I want to get that. Like we don't have anybody to like cast your leg, but if there's kind of problems that are leading up to it, there's things that we can do maybe before we get to a surgical level. And I really appreciate having that conservative care along the way, and finding the fit for each person, which has been really interesting as well. So I think it's opened my scope a little bit.
Going from that emergent style care to that preventative experience, but yet still putting the patient, the client, at the heart of it all, and seeing them for where they are at, and caring for them to get to where they want to be. And if you've got the right tools, then you can help them along that way.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Right.
So I'll touch. Sorry, go ahead.
So going from a career that that you've been in for quite some time to making the jump to going into the clinic, what was your choice point that you came up to make that decision?
So I'll also say I'm a little bit of I would say I go with my intuition as well.
Right.
Would be how some of my choices came to light. And there was a good portion of time there where I was actively working to try and change some of the things in the hospital that could just use a little bit of assistance with. And so there was a group of us that were working together. And I think there became a point where I just recognized that there was only going to be so much that we could do within a massive system.
Right.
And I really appreciated the one-on-one working with clients. I really appreciated the critical thinking, but that kind of massive system that needs to be looked at as a whole, I think I realized that I was kind of reaching my capacity in that space.
Right.
And so there was quite a portion of time where, my husband and I were talking about it and looking at, is there an opportunity for me in our clinic, and what does that look like? And so it had been on my radar for a while, and I walked into my boss's office and I had just asked him, hey, like, what does it look like if I was to give you my notice? Like, how long do I need to give you my notice? And he's like, oh, well, you'll need to give me 28 days. I thought, oh my goodness, 23 days. So I pulled out my calendar and I started counting my days, and all of a sudden I realized, I was like, yeah, I quit. And I think he was, just like, I don't know, just in that moment, I was like, I think I'm done. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think he was pretty surprised. He's like, oh, well, you don't have to. and so with the option of obviously being a nurse, there's a huge flexibility in that you can go casual. And so that I, would still have a revenue stream if I needed it. And so I decided I quit. I gave my notice. I came home. I told my husband, I was like, so I quit today. and he's like, oh, okay, well, so what are you gonna do? I'm like, I don't know, we'll figure this out, like, it'll come.
Yeah.
Sure enough, that weekend I go to a bookstore, and I just happened to be chatting with a gal, and she was a nurse, and she had mentioned that she doesn't usually tell other people that she's a nurse. She's like, oh yeah, I work at this another place in town or whatever, you should just really apply. And so I gave their office a call, and I had an interview, and by Wednesday I had a new job. So it was just very fluid, and it just kind of went just sort of sorted itself out. And same thing, then we really started evaluating a little bit more what private. So I stayed at that clinic for a portion of time, which was great. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. But then once I had made that transition out of the hospital, I really started looking at what makes the most sense for our family, what makes the most sense in terms of private practice, and pulling me into our business was going to be the biggest benefit to us. So yeah, it was a great little stepping stone, but ultimately that helped to pull me into our space.
When you said, "Oh, I quit," who was more surprised, you or the boss at that moment?
Both. I think it kind of just fell out of my mouth, and then all of a sudden, as I was walking away, I remember walking out of his office, and I was like, "Oh, I just quit. I just that wasn't the intention."
You went, I went there just to figure the date out, I and now I know it. Okay.
Yeah, which you know what I think it's one of those things where all of a sudden you just kind of have a knowing of, yeah, I hit my expiration point here, or
Yeah.
with whatever it is, you kind of get a sense of like, yeah, it's run its course.
Mm. And if sounds like there was like without being able to put words to it at the moment, but like it sounds like there was just an innate trust you had within yourself to just like, I quit and be like, huh, I guess I'll figure this out. And
Hmm.
being able again, pull back to that put you in charge of your destiny again.
Hmm. Yeah, more of a choice piece, I think, like we kind of talked about earlier. I
Yeah.
think for quite a portion of time I was working and enjoying it, but constantly keeping an ear out for something else. And sometimes I think the lessons come where you are forced to make a new path. So
Mm.
I had been sitting in there's this great podcast that I had saw or have seen quite a while ago now, but they talk about how often when you are in a mediocre situation, you're in a worse situation than if it was actually quite a bit shittier, for
Yeah.
lack of a better term. So what I mean is, if you've got this relationship that it's like, it's okay, it's not bad, it's not terrible, but if you were in a really bad situation where somebody was treating you extremely poorly, you would just leave. You'd be like,
Right.
that's enough, I don't like it, I'm going to leave. But when you're kind of sitting in this mediocre status, we tend to stay and put up with it a lot longer. And I think that's where I was until I finally hit that I had had enough. And it was that moment that I realized, nope, that is enough. I've
Right.
hit the breaking
Yeah.
point.
And that what you were pointing to there is that's a real thing. Is like as humans, we'll put up with a lot as long as
Mm-hmm.
it's not really bad. Like we're actually really good at survival, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
survival state. Being in that, going, well, I don't know what's on the other side of this, so that's scary. That could impact my
Mm-hmm.
survival, and it's not as bad as it could be. So like don't rock the boat, right? Like that's what
Yep.
our brains and are trying to keep us alive and doing. But
Safe.
being that can also get us in some pretty big trouble, further down the road. And you eventually build that, like you said, you build that capacity to you're like, no more. Like
Yeah.
I need something different.
Uh, you need a
And
shake
then
up.
and then at that point you get back to your choice of like, well, this could suck or this could be a cool adventure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting sometimes that when we just get out of our own way, what will come.
Yeah. And then being open to that is like, who knows if you hadn't said I quit, you could have still been in that same bookstore with that same other person and never would have had that type of conversation because it would have not been front and center for you.
Mm-hmm. Top of mind, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very
Yeah.
exciting. Thanks for sharing
What would
some of those things. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry,
Well,
go
what
ahead,
was that
Brianna.
like for you, Jane? Because you made a transition yourself into coaching. And how
I
did that
have,
happen for
yes.
you?
Multiple jumps along the way. I would say so. Like, well, a lot of people have listened to the show for a while, but
Yeah.
um, so my big jump came. I co-founded a company called Cheeky Monkey Media back, well, many years ago now. It's been, I think, almost 6 years since I've left.
Hmm.
Um, but I got to this point where I was just like, I just didn't want to keep doing the same thing. Like we kept having and I've been in tech in many different venues. made great money. It was like, as far as like safe and secure goes, we had it. We built that team was up to 20 plus people plus contractors. It was a great. It was we did some real interesting things, but I just couldn't watch another project go out the door and knowing that it wasn't going to go somewhere. And I got to the point that I was just like, I need something different. And this, I needed something different message just kept coming up and coming up. And I hunted and farmed for it and finally went, well, I need to make a jump. And at that point, I got headhunted by a startup and went off on my own. And from there, I just kept making these jumps going, what do I want to do? What do I want to do? What do I want to do? Until I finally stopped and realized the question is, who do I want to be?
Mm-hmm.
And when I realized I was asking the wrong question all that time, I started finding answers in places I never even looked before. And that's when I realized, what do I like? Who do I want to be is like somebody who's calm, somebody who's present. I love when people have that aha, holy shit moment because of a question that's been asked or a perspective that's been brought to them. And because I was in that room sharing that perspective with them. And I started going, well, what kind of roles do that? And that's how I
Mm-hmm.
eventually found coaching outside of instead of consulting was like that's the key going. I knew who I wanted to be. So now I've just been putting all this effort into learning to be that me is like me without a mask, me without, you know, worrying about what am I going to do. Is just like, well, if I focus on who I want to be, so far, I'll knock on wood, I've been pretty blessed to have been able to keep finding the synergies and the alignment to the doing side of that being.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. What do you think is the best question you've asked yourself that led you to one of your biggest aha moments?
Oh, that's a good one. Now the roles are switched. The best question. I would say this one came from an observation from one of my coaches when I was doing my training. And I've heard variations of this, but it never sat quite like it did. And the coach went, "You're always moving." Like I was like when I'm talking, my hand talker, just always moving.
Mm-hmm.
And she's just like, "Why? Why does everything have to be so fast?" And it was just like that was kind of like a kick in the pants for me. It's like, why does everything have to be so fast? I don't usually like why questions because why can be a
Mm-hmm.
defensive place, but it's like, well, then I started asking, well, what's in the speed of it? And started to
Mm-hmm.
realize the more I slowed down is like, what am I, the kind of the question what is some form of like, what will I experience if I slow down today?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of being in a hurry to get everything done. Like I realized my life didn't need to be an Alabama song. I wasn't in a hurry to get everything done. And the more that
Mm-hmm.
I've come to terms and ask myself that on a daily basis, the more depth I get into my life, and more depth I get into whatever that moment is, and the more I find I can shed a whole bunch of my to-dos because I'm just piling them up for some sort of weird achievements status versus being productive, being fulfillment on myself, and keeping my promises to myself and to those who I make them to.
Mm-hmm. Good insights there. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, great question, honestly. I'm going to steal that for myself down the road.
To be honest, I'm usually the one on the other side. It's not a role that you would think that a nurse would have often, but when you get all of this very, I'll say, intimate or one-on-one time with a person,
Yeah.
and you have the ability to shift somebody's perspective so vastly without when they're in a vulnerable state. Most people do
Mm,
not come to the hospital or do not seek out a nurse or do not seek out medical attention of whatever kind, whether it's preventative or not, unless they're looking for help.
right.
And coming to somebody to ask for help is a vulnerable state. So it's just been interesting in my career that I've had such a beautiful gift and space to allow people to settle into some of those aha moments too. And that's actually probably one of my favorites, is
Yeah.
the same as, whether I'm the first person who sees you with your leg amputated and how you're going to respond to that, or whether I'm the person who's explaining to you how your loved one just had this massive heart attack, or how we're going to walk you through it. And it's, what? Yeah, it's scary, but we've got this step by step and we're going to figure it out, and we're together in this. And, or whether it's at the clinic and you've got maybe something that seems very superficial to a lot of people, but you've got acne scarring on your face that, what, when you walk into a room, it very much affects your confidence. And how can we get that better so that you can feel your best self?
Right.
Yeah, it's been an interesting
like
role.
in your role, it's like a lot of it is asking questions and trying to find out what's actually happening and how you're going to help them and how did they get to the state that they're in so that you can actually take action on it. So yeah, like in your role, I never really thought about it like that, as like part of your superpowers have to be asking good questions.
And how to do it without judgment.
Yes.
I think that's a big part too, is you're not going to get somebody to be open unless they feel like it's safe.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I think that's something that both of our careers can share from, is like, it doesn't matter, being a nurse, being a coach, being a leader, whatever, if you're in those positions asking questions and you have responsibility of care for people, is like a component of that to get them engaged is like you have to like leave your judgments and your biases at the door and lead with curiosity and compassion.
Very, very much so. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for like this little like detour down this area. Is there any other questions you need asked?
I was going to say not where we thought we were going to go today, but that's okay.
But that's the beauty of this show, is like, there's a component of, I enjoy the winging it. You never know where a great conversation is going to go, right? And so not having that structured, where is this going to go, is like when we lead up and have that initial conversation, it's like we're going to pass the 40-minute mark. That's our goals. That's that sign of, are we having an engaging back and forth conversation? And how does that then, where else can people take those opportunities to hear an unedited conversation and apply that elsewhere in their lives, to have permission to be like, hey, these two can go up here and record it and share a conversation that we would have had around a coffee, or here we are sharing it with the world.
I think one of my favorite questions that I'll often ask, and everybody asks this, is, hey, how are you? And most people will respond, oh yeah, I'm good, or yeah, I'm good. But when you can hear the hesitation in somebody, where like, yeah, I'm good, that didn't sound real, so then to dig in and just take like 10 more seconds or 30 more seconds and just ask them again, but like how are you really though?
Yes.
It's so interesting how when you actually create that space for people, that often there's more going on, and we don't always have that space, and it's okay to acknowledge that, because I've absolutely heard that in people before, where hey, how are you, and you can hear they're like, I'm okay, and I don't have the whole space of time that I want to. I'll just acknowledge it and say, hey, what, I hear that this is probably, there's more here. I don't have a minute right now to dig into this, but let's talk later.
Yeah.
Right? It just, it's a level of caring to show people that I see you. I know that you may or may not be okay. Maybe you are. Maybe this is like, I feel so great and there's so much to say, and that's great too. I want to hear all that kind of stuff as well. But just to acknowledge that I'm present, I'm here, you are important. I think that's what it says to a lot of people.
I really like how you frame that, Breanna, is like, you may or may not have the time to dig at the moment, and acknowledging that component of it and going, you're still seen. I hear something more and I'd love to get into it. When can we do that?
Yeah.
I think that's a real good takeaway too. There's a moment to be clipped and shared again.
Yeah, for sure. Just because you don't always have the time at this exact moment doesn't mean that it's not important. I think a common one that I see with people too is they'll be standing and looking at their phone. And so you and I will be having a conversation, and then your phone rings, then you pull it out and you look at it. And then
Yeah.
I'm doing this while you're still talking to me. And
Yes.
I think that's one that we often forget, that, you know, maybe whatever is going on is you can't be 100% removed all the time. That's okay
Yeah.
as well. But using that same structure of saying, okay, you know what? Oh, shoot. You know what, Jean? This is the babysitter. I just need 2 seconds here. I have to just attend to this, but I want to give you my full attention. So just give me 1 second, rather than you're still trying to talk to me while I'm still trying to do something else. So finish up here, put it away, and then, yeah, sorry about that, Jean. I'm
Yeah.
present. What would you like to talk about?
Oh, and that, yes, all of that is like, yeah, I hear that adds on to that curiosity and compassion, but there's a consideration that's added to it too, right? Is when you're in a conversation, pull this back to those deciding to make the deep commitment to the relationship, going like, is this going to be surface or is this going to be more? And by
Mm-hmm.
saying, hey, I hear that, I want to give you my my time, my attention, let's get into this, and here's how we're going to continue to frame that, and always bringing it back as the moments change. Is like each one of those different moments and those actions, you get to make another set of choices. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
how am I going to choose? Am I going to be in connection, or am I going to be in disconnection?
Well, and I think it goes to your piece of, who do I want to be?
Yeah.
Who do I want to be in each of those scenarios? Do I want to be somebody who feels like when you're talking to me that I'm giving you my time and attention, or do I want to be a person who constantly looks busy and moving, fast moving, and I, and that answer can be very different for different people.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And I think it just comes down to maybe making that time to asking, who do I want to be, and being kind of like prepared as you go about your days. Like, who do I want to be with my wife? Who do I want to be with my kids? Who do I want to be with on my show? And who do I want, like, all of those
Mm-hmm.
have like a core who do you want to be, but there's also like an intention that you can then set along
Mm-hmm.
those ways. Is like, today my intention is to have a great conversation and to be present and to find the ways to make the best of our time together, and looking up and realizing we did blow past our time limit, just like I suspected, and we've gone all over the map with it too, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's power in it, in making the choice of saying, hey, to that other person, we might not have the time to go deep, but I can still see you, and I can still hope you're having a good day, and maybe we'll be able to go deeper later on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for like just a great conversation that went over a whole bunch of different themes today. Like, this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, kind of went a little bit everywhere, but you know what? Those are typically the best conversations.
I think so as well. So again, just thank you so much. And as I said, I want to be respectful of your time. We are past the 40-minute mark, so this is the opportunity now for you to not be humble, but to share about the things that are going on. I know that you guys have a grand opening coming soon for the business, so why don't you give us a little shout out for that, and a shout out for the rest of the things that you do within the
Yeah.
health clinic?
So we are a multidisciplinary clinic. We moved into our new space 3 years ago now. So right in the heart of COVID, which is why we didn't have a grand opening at the time. And we just thought, why not do one now? So we're having a just an anniversary party, a 3rd-year anniversary party, May 18th. It's 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. There's going to be lots of giveaways. There's an opportunity to come have some treats and check out our space and coffee, and kind of a bit of a meet and greet as well. So if you're so inclined, pop in for that. We've got some free compression therapy going on you can try out, which actually feels amazing if you've been sitting at a desk all day, or whether you've done a big run, kind of like a big massager. And then myself, what I have now really gotten into is I'm doing medical aesthetics, like we kind of talked about, vitamin IVs and iron IVs. And it was, a lot of our offerings have come very organically, and our iron IVs, for example, was a growing from the hospital kind of shrunk down what their parameters were and who could get it. We had a client who was really seeking this treatment and couldn't find it really anywhere else with a clinic that they felt safe and respected in. And so we told them, if we could make this happen, Absolutely. And so it kind of started to grow from that. And now in 6 months, it's quite busy, which is
That's
phenomenal.
awesome.
It's been great. Yeah. So we kind of just try to support where we can when we can.
That's very awesome. Where can people find you?
Oh, so we are, if you're in Kelowna, our physical location is the bottom of Landmark 1. And so you'll find obviously a number of chiros, naturopaths, physios, all the things there. And if you're looking for us online, you can go to valeohealthclinic.com, as well as we're also on Instagram at Valeo Health Clinic, and you find us there. There's lots of free information there too for anybody who's looking for exercise rehab or any of the services. We're constantly popping up videos that have really good content. So if you've been sitting at your desk all day and you need a good stretch to kind of open up your chest, a lot of people are hunching over. Whether you're interested in vitamin IVs and how to support your health a little bit more that way, yeah, there's a bunch of free info there.
Perfect. All right, and all those links are down below in the show notes. So before I let you go, Breanna, the last question is, how do you define personal trust?
I think personal trust is finding a person or a group of people that you can truly be yourself with. That's how you know you have deep personal trust.
Love that answer. Thank you so much. All right, and for everybody
Thanks
else,
for
thank
having
you.
me, Jean.
You're very welcome. And for everybody else, thank you for watching along. My name's Gene. This has been episode 113 of Conversations With, and we will talk to you next Wednesday. See you then.
Bye.